Chapter 119. What can I do to help? Summary. They're back in the kiddo. They're safe. But that doesn't feel like it's enough. The pitter-patter of falling water penetrated through the walls of the bathroom and into the quiet of the main room. Denki was facing the window, guiding the ship through the shining star cluster they'd fled into. Kachan slumped on his command chair, lazily staring off into nothing, though Izuku, lying in the central blanket nest, could see how the sensor screens never quite left his periphery. Izuku wanted to be up there with Denki, helping watch out for solar flares or trailing ships. But no. He was just lying there. It wasn't even a bad concussion, and minor quirk exhaustion didn't even count. He hadn't been able to do enough before, but that just meant he had to keep going. He could help. He could do things. The others didn't think so, though, so he was banned from leaving the nest. He'd done what he could to help, when Mei and Ochako had sat Mina down on the edge of the nest and tended to her wounds. He loaded the new suture gun they'd gotten a few stops ago, while the two cleaned out Mina's wounds. He'd held her hand as Mei used the device to stitch together the wounds too long and deep for bandages to hold closed. He'd rearranged the nest while the two girls led Mina away to wash off properly. The sound of the shower still droned in the background. He'd done all he could, and now he was just sitting here, thinking, which was something he didn't really want to be doing right now. Thinking about what had happened in the hours he and the others had been asleep made his chest feel tight. She'd been alone and hurt, and how could this happen? Hadn't they all been through enough? Hadn't they been hurt enough? But now, Mina, still 16, still a teenager like the rest of them, had killed someone just to survive. The splintered sound of her voice when she had told them what happened, just thinking about how he had wanted to kill them, made him feel lightheaded. Though that may just be the concussion. But the worst part about that was he couldn't say he felt any different now. Sure, he was calmer, much less likely to do something stupid. But he still wanted to kill them. He wanted to make sure they couldn't hurt her or anyone else in that way ever again. He wanted to make things better. But he couldn't. He laid his head down on the soft blankets, blinking slowly at a blood-red flower. It felt as though he was under a weighted blanket. There were other things he really didn't want to think about, like the fact he could remember hearing Aizawa and All Might in the void before he'd forced his quirk to wake him up. Everyone there had definitely heard him say he was going to kill someone, but it'd been at least an hour since then. The three visitors must already be gone. Dealing with the ghostly ensemble in his head didn't sound like a great time right now, even if they'd have been able to see everything that happened when it was just them. But he just felt so tired. His eyelids were so heavy. He just needed to. He could feel it before he opened his eyes, the pressing cooling of the void. Izuku! Nana cried, followed by the others. They swarmed around him with questions and concerns on their tongues. Then, a voice he wasn't expecting to hear broke through the jumble.
So, Izuku, baby, how did the murder go?
His father asked, pushing his way through the crowd of ghosts.
What?
Izuku spluttered out. How could he still be here? Shouldn't it have been too long between when Izuku was knocked out and now for them to have stayed? He wasn't sure if he should be happy his father was here, wrapping him in his arms, or upset he'd have to recount what had happened to 3 extra curious faces.
I asked how it went,
his father said in a much softer voice, much closer to the one in his memories from when he was little. Izuku kept his gaze on his father's suit jacket.
I didn't. Kachan wouldn't let me go. I wasn't thinking straight. Thank goodness,
All Might said from behind Izuku. He sounded so relieved. It made Izuku feel guilty.
Shush your face, ass mite.
His father turned back towards Izuku.
That's all right, baby. This just wasn't your time. You'll kill them next time. No, he won't,
All Might spluttered. I might. Izuku's voice was small, but it silenced the quiet chatter that had surrounded the group.
If I ever see them again, I might kill them. They're horrible.
At the sound of shifting bodies, Izuku looked up from his father's shoulders to see Aizawa kneeling in front of him.
What did they do?
Izuku didn't speak for a moment. Then,
they took her. They tricked us and they took her. They brought her into their arena under their capital. They thought she was something else. They dropped her in that forest and they went after her. We were all asleep while they were trying to kill her. Izuku.
All Might tried, but the greenette shook his head and continued.
You didn't see her. She was covered in blood and so many cuts. And the look in her eyes. It was like she wasn't there. When we got her back, she just kept saying how she didn't want to. She didn't want to kill him. But she was caught in a trap, and he was pushing the knife towards her. And when his grip slipped, she was already pushing it and they're still out there. They could hurt her again, and they're going to hurt others again. The sovereigns said they had hundreds of skeletons of whatever they thought she was. They could hurt her again. So if I ever saw them, I might kill them. And I don't know if I'm okay with that.
The whole time, Aizawa had just been looking at Izuku with steady, understanding eyes. He nodded.
How you're feeling is all right, Izuku. What they did is horrible, and you're allowed to want them to not be able to hurt anyone again. But just because you feel that way doesn't mean you can act on those feelings. Killing should always be a last resort. So if you ever run into whoever did this, make sure it is.
Izuku nodded his head slightly. He didn't understand everything that Aizawa had just said. His mind was still too caught up in the storm of everything that had just happened. But he understood enough.
Okay. Good,
Aizawa said, with a bit of a strained smile.
But I have to ask. You keep saying she. Which one of them is the she you're talking about? Oh, I hadn't realized. I didn't. Sorry. It was Mina.
Aizawa took a deep breath in, held it for a moment, before letting it go.
You kids are getting so much therapy when this is all over.
Izuku chuckled a little.
But Aizawa, we've already got shitty circle therapy. I think the fact that it has shitty in the name might be an indicator that it might not be as good as what Hound Dog could help you with. When's the last time you did shitty circle therapy?
Izuku furrowed his eyebrows.
It was when we dropped Pyerpa and Fastel on their planet, I think. It's probably about time you had another one then, my boy.
All Might said with a warm smile.
Yeah, it probably is.